He told me I was worthless.
So for 5 years, I worked.
But I bought this.
I didn't just rebuild my life. He called me worthless. I was about to show him my price.
Stories Hub, the home of real stories. Before everything changed, there was just us, Mark and Amelia. We weren't just a couple, we were a team, building a life out of shared dreams and late-night laughter. We didn't have much, but in moments like this under a warm sun, it felt like we had everything. And every weekend, rain or shine, would drive through those quiet streets lined with perfect homes, each one a whispered promise of a future we were so sure we would build together. We'd pick out our favorite, the one with the big front porch, and just imagine our life unfolding within those walls. But slowly the dream began to sour. The future he talked about started to sound different. His compliments became critiques. He'd look at our tiny apartment, not with shared hope, but with a cold kind of disappointment, a tiny seed of doubt planted where there was once only unwavering belief. The end came on a Tuesday. I remember the rain on the window. He didn't yell it was worse, it was quiet. He looked right through me and said the words that would become the blueprint for my new life. I'm destined for more than this, and more than you. He told me I was worthless, and then just like that, he was gone. His words became my reality. I felt worthless. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Every corner held a ghost of the life we were supposed to build, a future that had vanished in a single breath. It was just me and the silence now, and the silence was winning. Days blurred into weeks of just surviving. The apartment became a tomb filled with ghosts of the past and a mountain of bills I couldn't pay. Each envelope felt like another stone pulling me under. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was broke and completely alone. And in the quiet moments when the exhaustion was too much to bear, his voice would come back, a cruel whisper in the silence. It was a poison that had taken root in my mind. I started to believe him. Maybe I'm really worthless. But staring at my own reflection, seeing the tired eyes and the tear-stained face, something inside me snapped. The sadness turned into fuel, a quiet anger that started as a flicker and then a flame. He would not be the author of my story. My story was just beginning. The first year was a blur of caffeine and code. My world shrank to the size of my laptop screen. I learned about business, about marketing, about finance. I took every free course I could find, replacing the memory of his voice with the words of professors and entrepreneurs. The second year was ramen noodles and 18-hour workdays. I was a ghost haunting the city, taking every shift I could get. A barista by day, a data entry clerk by night, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning desire to prove him wrong. Every dollar saved was a brick in my new foundation. And then one day in the third year, it happened. The first real breakthrough. A notification popped up on my screen. First major client sign. It wasn't a lottery win, it was better. It was proof that the sleepless nights and the sacrifice were finally building something real, something that was mine. By year 4, it wasn't just my dream anymore. It was ours. I hired my first employee, a brilliant young developer named Chloe. It was just the two of us against the world in a tiny office. But for the first time, it felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building a real company, a team. By year 5, we weren't a tiny startup anymore. We were a force, a real player in the industry. I wasn't that heartbroken girl surviving on ramen. I was a CEO, and the lessons his betrayal taught me became the bedrock of my success. I learned to be resilient, strategic, and to never ever let anyone define my worth again. 5 years had passed. I had my own company, my own life. He was a ghost, a faded memory of a lesson learned. I rarely thought about the past. I was too busy building the future, a future he never could have imagined for me or for himself. Then one Tuesday morning, just like any other, an email landed in my inbox. I almost archived it, a routine notification from a financial group, but the subject line caught my eye. It read, "Acquisition Opportunity, Sterling Corp." My heart stopped. It was his company, the one he left me to join, the one he always bragged about. The name on the screen felt like a ghost from another life, Sterling Corp. And according to this report, it was failing badly. And in that moment, 5 years of pain and struggle and sacrifice crystallized into a single perfect opportunity. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about business. It was about value, and this was the most undervalued asset I had ever seen. The day of the acquisition meeting, I woke up before the sun. It wasn't just another business deal. It was the closing of a circle. 5 years of my life culminating in this one moment. I chose my suit carefully. It was my armor, my uniform for the battle ahead. Walking into the Sterling Corp headquarters felt surreal. This was the temple. He worshipped this monument to corporate ambition. And as I walked through the marble lobby, I didn't feel like an intruder. I felt like I was coming home to claim what was mine. I was the first to arrive. I chose the seat at the head of a table, the one reserved for the person in charge. I sat there in the silence, letting the reality of the moment sink in. This room, this table, this was the pinnacle of his world, and I was about to own it. The board members filed in one by one, and then the door opened again. He walked in, oozing that same old arrogance, a little older, but completely unchanged. He was smiling that familiar, charming smile, ready to impress the faceless buyer who held his company's fate in their hands. He shook a few hands, and then his eyes scanned the table, making his way to the seat of power at the head. He looked right at me. First there was nothing, just a blank stare, then a flicker of confusion. And then, like a tidal wave, it hit him. The color drained from his face. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. I let it hang in the air. I watched him process 5 years of his own choices, 5 years of my struggle, all colliding in this single devastating moment. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I let him stand there in the ruins of his own, I let every other person in that room see him for what he truly was, small. And then when the silence was at its most powerful, I calmly picked up a pen from the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I looked directly at him, and then I spoke. My voice was calm, clear, and professional. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. For those who don't know me, I am the new owner of this company. I let my ownership sink in, and then I began. I calmly opened the first report and said, let's begin with the quarterly performance reports. I have some concerns. I then proceeded to calmly and clinically detail every missed opportunity, every bad investment, every failure. And after detailing the fiscal mismanagement, I looked directly at him for the last time and said the biggest failure of this company was a failure of leadership, a failure to see value where it existed. I will not be making that same mistake. Effective immediately. Your position is redundant. He resigned a week later. He sent a one-line email, no apology, no explanation, just an admission of defeat in the end. I didn't need to fire him. He had made himself irrelevant, a ghost in the corporation I now owned and controlled. Standing in his old office, my new office looking out at the city, I finally understood it was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming my own story. He thought my worth was tied to a bank account, but he was wrong. My worth was in my resilience. He never understood that his betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the fire I needed to forge a new one. My worth was never his to give or take away. It was something I had to build myself, one painful brick at a time, and I wouldn't trade a single one of them. That was my story of hitting rock bottom and finding the strength to build something new. So many of us have faced moments that were meant to break us. If you've ever had to overcome a challenge in your own life, leave a comment below and share a piece of your story. I read every single one. And if you believe, like I do, that our stories are what connect us, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching.